So I was recently watching a lot of Paolo Banchero tape, specifically him for an article I wrote. I'll leave a link to that in the description. But also, that led me to watch general Magic tape, because you're watching one player and then it evolves into, oh, let me look at this other player because I know he's good at this and X, Y, and Z. And that led me to determine that the Magic are pretty good. They have a solid shot at, I think, winning a playoff series. I don't think they'll be any super serious contender or anything, but I would not be shocked if they got a playoff series win, which would be the first since Dwight Howard, I'm pretty sure. And, there's a lot of good to the Magic, and they'd play the Knicks right now, and I've, stated I'm high on the Knicks in past few weeks. Since the OG trade, really, they've looked pretty excellent, but also they've not been super healthy, so if the Magic catch them on a stretch where they're not healthy, Magic could easily win that series, I could see them doing that. Now, what makes the Magic good most of the time is their defense, right? They're a very defensive-oriented team. And I think a lot of this comes down to their personnel and also their scheme. Jamal Mosley is an excellent defensive coach. He has a great scheme going down there. They gave the Nuggets some problems earlier in the season, and the Nuggets are a well-oiled machine. Everyone knows this. They've given a lot of teams a lot of trouble. They're currently fourth in the NBA in defensive rating with a 111.1. And they have some lineups that absolutely lock down. Like their bench lineup, which is their most used bench lineup, rather. Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, and Mo Wagner. That lineup has a defensive rating of 94.3, which would be second in the NBA back in 2003-2004, behind only the Spurs. That would be better than the Pistons that year, and that is the 2004 Pistons. The ones led by Ben Wallace and Chauncey Billups? Those guys. So some of their lineups absolutely lock up. Now, taking a look at some of the stats behind that, I think a lot of their defensive success has to do with for the bench specifically, it's because they have good defenders on the bench, right? They have Jonathan Isaac, who is one of the best defenders in the league, and Gary Harris, who, historically speaking, very good defender, is not as good as he once was, but, still very good defender in Orlando. They have Anthony Black, who has been a very good defender for a rookie this season. Franz isn't bad. Wendell Carter Jr. is phenomenal. He has really good positioning. He knows how to deter people from getting drives on him. And a large section of this video is going to be me gushing about Wendell Carter Jr. because I think he's great. But, you look at a lot of the personnel, and a lot of it is defensively oriented. So when you have guys like John Isaac, when you have guys like Wendell Carter, when you have guys like Jalen Suggs, who, by the way, all defensive caliber this season. Jalen Suggs has been phenomenal this season, and the fact that he is getting talked about in all defensive discussions, but not nearly enough. He is that guy on defense. He is nasty on that end in a good way. He's very tenacious on the perimeter. On the interior, he can deter people at the rim. He's a decently good shot blocker for being a guard, and just absolutely locks up. Absolute demon on that end of the floor. Love watching Jalen Suggs' defense. Now, the defense is good, and if you look at Paolo Banchero, his on-off numbers, you get into a bit of why they would look bad, because Paolo right now, if you don't know, currently has a on-off number that is a negative 6.9 per cleaning the glass, and that is not good, right? That's not what you want your franchise player to have, but I don't think that it's actually that bad. Because if you go into the underlying stats, the offense takes a decent hit at like negative 2.5, basically. But you look at the defense, and it looks a lot worse, because that's like a plus 4.5. So with those two in mind, you go, what's happening with Paolo in defense? And the answer is that the other Magic lineups are just good defensively without him on the floor, because he's the offensive option, right? And a lot of the times the sub for him is John Isaac. And John Isaac is a great defender and not a good offensive player, right? So you end up getting John Isaac in there for Paolo, who is a decent defender at times, but definitely has defensive lapses in things. He doesn't always pay attention, doesn't have great defensive awareness sometimes, because when you are a young player who is very offensive minded and doesn't always, and has a heavy load. He has a 31% usage. That leaves you with not a ton of energy sometimes on that end, and he can ball watch. He can just kind of let his man get lost. But when he is locked in, he's good as specifically as a low man, because he has good size. He has tools, physical tools that allow him to contest shots well. He has a good feel for the game, and that does translate to defense when he's locked in. He knows when to rotate over, when to help. And while most of the feel for his game comes in passing and that sort of thing, very, very decent defender when he's locked in. It's just that when he's on the floor, the Magic have a 113.2.8 defensive rating. I forget which one it is exactly, but it would be good enough for 11th in the league right now, ahead of the Memphis Grizzlies, right behind the Denver Nuggets. And the Nuggets are a good defense, right? So like being in that crowd is good defense, not great defense like the Magic are just in general. And then without Paolo on the floor, it goes up to 108.3, which is 0.1 decimal percent behind the Celtics for first in the NBA. And that is why Paolo's net rating doesn't look good. But also, Paolo is good. Paolo is a very good player, and I don't want people to think that he's just like an inefficient Julius Randle, which is something I've heard from people. Like, he has a high usage, 31%. So he's the engine for them, right? He's the main heartbeat of this offense. And the offense isn't fantastic, but it's better than it has been in years past, and a lot of that has to do with him and Franz. Paolo specifically has an assist percentage of 25%. That means he's assisting on a quarter of his team's shots. And also, if you watch him, his shot diet is, well, flawed. He takes 44% of his shots from mid-range and only 35% of his shots at the rim, yada yada. That kind of makes sense because he's being guarded by, if he goes against the Cavaliers, he's guarded by Evan Mobley and then has to run into Jared Allen. If he's, when he was going against the Bucks, he was guarded by Giannis. You're not going to get a ton of drives past Giannis, but he's very crafty from the mid-range, and he knows how to, do these pump fakes and little head fakes, and he's very shifty, so he can get to his spots in the mid-range, and that frees him up to do a lot of the stuff that we see on tape, right? That boy nice shit, because let me tell you, that boy is nice. He knows how to do stuff with the rock that I wish a lot of people knew how to do. And he does shoot 42% from long mid-range, which is good. That's a good percentage. That's 70th percentile basic for bigs. And he's not the most efficient scorer right now. He's not the best player in the league right now, obviously. But also, he's a second-year player. He was an all-star this year, and he's playing on an all-star level, but he's a second-year player. He's not going to be perfect. He's going to have lapses in his reading. He's not going to read the game like a veteran forward. He's going to be a flawed ball handler that can create for his teammates, because he's a very, very good passer. He is a very, very, very good passer. If you watch some of the highlights that I've been showing, you can see that he makes pocket passes. You can see that he makes good, like, tight window reads. You can see he makes skip passes sometimes, one-handed passes, and he makes passes out of the triple threat. He knows how to operate an offense, and he will continue to operate an offense at a decent level. Now, let me get to the Wendell Carter bit, right? Because a lot of the Paolo success comes when he's in lineups that are spaced well. The floor is spaced. And that makes sense. For a guy who does a lot of his business at the rim and in the mid-range, you need space to do that, right? You're not going to be driving in to 5 guys and then have a mid-range shot that is a good shot. But one of the most used lineups for the Magic with Paolo specifically this season is Jalen Suggs, Gary Harris, Franz, Paolo, and Wendell. Now, that lineup is good spacing, right? Jalen Suggs has become a good three-point shooter this season. Gary Harris is a good three-point shooter. Franz Wagner, good three-point shooter. Wendell Carter, good three-point shooter, especially for his position. A lot of what makes that lineup tick, and by the way, when I say tick, they have a plus 19.7 net rating. So they're a really good lineup, right? They have a 99.1 defensive rating and a 118.8 offensive rating. A lot of the juice for that lineup comes from Paolo having space to operate and then being able to kick out to shooters, or Franz being able to, do some primary side creation, pass it over to Paolo, and then he can have some second side creation, or vice versa. And Wendell Carter Jr. is kind of the key to that, because the 5-man in a lineup with Paolo is going to kind of determine what you can do. Because Goga Badatse is the other, frequent center in Paolo lineups. And he's not bad, right? But he's a very Ivica Zubats sort of mold of player. He's not a shooter. He does not space the floor, and that can kind of crowd up Paolo's driving lanes. Because if you set if Goga sets a pick for Paolo, and Paolo goes to drive, Goga's man can help off of Goga and not be too concerned about it, and then that leaves, the guy from the corner to come help against Goga. And if Paolo can even get the ball to Goga doesn't have exactly the highest feel to kick it out to the corner, and even if he does, rotate, whatever. Wendell, on the other hand, you can't help off of Wendell too much if it's a pick and pop or if it's a pick and roll, because he's a good shooter, he's a good finisher, and he can also shoot from mid. So, Wendell, also excellent passer. So, Paolo can get doubled. He can find Wendell, and Wendell will find the open man. Or one play that I saw specifically was Paolo gets the ball, then Wendell comes to set a screen at the top. Paolo's going to snake the dribble, right? He's going to snake the pick and roll, which just means he kind of goes around it like a snake. He goes around it, comes back the other side. And then Wendell, something that he does that makes it so easy for Paolo to get a shot off is he kind of does what's called a Gortat screen, which is where you kind of operate as an offensive lineman from football. It's an illegal screen most of the time, but you kind of put your body between the ball handler that you're screening for and the guy that's trying to get back to him. So when Wendell does this against, in this specific possession, it was against the Raptors, he keeps, I believe it was RJ Barrett guarding him, keeps him from getting back to Paolo, so that leaves Paolo to just take an open jumper, more or less. It looks contested, but it's contested by the center. So he has to jump towards Paolo, and Paolo has enough room to just pull up, drops. That is what makes Wendell special for these lineups, is his feel for the game, his ability to screen, to be a good screener, to space the floor, to be someone who can be a hub playmaking-wise, and also he's a great defender. So I think that's what makes the Magic. That's what their little spice is the Wendell Carter Jr. of it all. Also, to just briefly touch on it, Franz is great. There are enough videos about Franz out there that you can go watch. Alex Hoops had one last season. That was pretty good. You can go watch that. But I'm running a little long on this video here, so I'm going to cut it here. But if you guys want me to do any other videos, if you want me to do longer form stuff, I can do that. Just leave a comment. If you liked this, comment, subscribe. See you guys later.